Good evening and welcome to UCLA Royce Hall for a special event this evening. My name is Michael Silton. I'm the Executive Chair of the UCLA Venture Capital Fund. The UCLA Venture Capital Fund is a group of alumni that have gotten together to invest in startups from the UCLA community, from companies that are led by Bruins, whether those be alumni, faculty, or students. We've also put together an incredibly strong network of alumni entrepreneurs and venture capitalists to support those companies in their growth, and to bring the entrepreneurs back to campus to share their wisdom with the next generation of great entrepreneurs from UCLA. Tonight is an incredible example of that when we're bringing back Travis Kalanick, Bruin, UCLA engineering student, founder and CEO of Uber Technologies. And we get the added benefit of having a second Bruin who's created an incredible company asking the questions about his UCLA experience, his growth with Uber as well. Susan Feldman, who's the co-founder of One Kings Lane, is here and will be joining us on stage as well. UCLA is an incredible place for entrepreneurship. We're the #5 top university for entrepreneurs. And if you look at specifically for women entrepreneurs, we're #6. We can make both of those numbers higher, and with the learning and the sharing of ideas and great companies, we'll get there. Earlier today, Travis spent time with young alumni and student entrepreneurs, sharing his wisdom and his experience and taking their questions about their businesses. And tonight, we're going to learn a lot more as well. But before we get started, we're here tonight as well to present the UCLA Venture Capital Fund's Entrepreneurial Achievement Award to Travis. We all know that Uber is not only an incredible company that's changing the world, growing incredibly quickly, and changing our expectations of how startups work. In fact, many startups, when they're out looking for money, claim to be the Uber of X. Well, tonight we meet the Uber of Uber. I got to talk to some of the people that were here with Travis when he was starting his first company as a college student. And one of the professors was explaining to me how he was a business school graduate professor, and this young kid came to him who was just an undergrad. And what was an undergrad even doing in his offices? Well, that undergrad, of course, was Travis, and Travis wanted some advice from his professor, who was an expert. Well, the professor said, here, go off and do some research. I'm not going to talk to you. Off you go. Well, Travis was persistent, read the research, came back, and continued to push for advice and help. And he was so persistent and so adept at what he was doing that this professor ended up providing not only that advice, but his graduate students were working on a project that was helping Travis in his own company. So I think you can see that from an early age and throughout his growth at Uber, Travis Kalanick has represented the ideals that are what we look for when we award an Entrepreneurial Achievement Award. I'd also like to recognize in our audience today Travis's parents who are here with us, Bonnie and Don Kalanick. Thank you for joining us for this event and to recognize Travis. Don set the standard as a UCLA engineering student and clearly has helped guide Travis to come to UCLA as well, and I'm sure Bonnie had some influence there too. So we appreciate everything in the community. But Travis, to us in the Entrepreneurial Achievement, represents 3 things, and you see that in the story of how he got help. The first is to dream really big. The second is to work creatively to break the boundaries and to look outside the rules that have been governed, whether it's what you should be doing and where you get your resources as an undergrad or anything that he's done later in his career. And the third is persistence, that passion, that willingness to do anything to make it happen. So it is my great honor on behalf of the UCLA Venture Capital Fund and all of the Bruins here tonight to welcome Travis to the stage and recognize him with this wonderful award as the Entrepreneurial Achievement Award. Please welcome Travis Kalanick.
Let's just take a picture.
Yeah, let's just hold it up for a second. We'll do a photo together.
Okay, all right. So I don't have a a speech prepared right now. I think we're going to go and have a conversation after this. But when I was a student here, I did not think that I would be in Royce Hall, getting an award like this and talking on the stage. I may have been the guy in the back making noise that shouldn't have been, but it's really, you don't know it till you do it, but coming back feels really good. It's it's just a fun and sort of rewarding and fulfilling experience. So I'm really glad to be back. And the school it's exactly the same, though there's not a Taco Bell down there at the bottom of Bruin Walk, which I'm a little upset about. But it seems more beautiful than it did when I was here. So maybe that's because I was mostly in South Campus and never made it here. But it was really great to just get even a little walk around today. So guys, thank you very much. Just a little bit of a word. I think somebody was telling me there may be a protest here today for our conversation. I remember back in the day, there was a protest here at UCLA every day. And maybe that's where my roots of activism came from. This is probably not the best forum for it, but certainly at Uber, it's something we do appreciate, is just everybody having a voice and getting, whether it's to make change or to protect certain things. And so, I guess my offer to those who maybe were planning on protesting is I'd be more than happy to have conversations one-on-one or as a group afterwards to talk about the things that are concerning or the other issues that you may want to talk about. But if at all possible, if we could have a great conversation for an hour and then do maybe some Q&A and maybe even some heated Q&A after, sort of off stage, that would be great. So thank you very much. Thank you.
You feel so far away.
What's that?
You feel so far away.
That's all right. We could
We're
scoot
in
it in.
big chairs, like
Well,
Lily
not really.
Tomlin's here. Hi, everybody. I'm Susan Feldman, co-founder of One Kings Lane, and I'm an alum of Anderson School of Management. Like Travis. Well, like Travis, I don't think I ever imagined myself sitting on stage here at Royce Hall, many years after I graduated. But this is such an honor to be here and super excited to talk to Travis. I mean, there's not many people who have started businesses who the name of the business now is a verb. I'm Ubering here and, all that fun stuff. So I'm just as excited as I think all of you to hear about Travis's experience at UCLA and also his journey in the business world, because I think he's got a lot to share. So I also wanted to mention that all the questions that I'll be asking Travis tonight were submitted by the student body or the UCLA community. So I'd like to thank everybody for all the questions that were submitted and everybody's support to get Travis back on campus so that he can share all of his great knowledge. So we'll start off with a fun, easy question to get going, which is, so Travis, what was a typical Friday night like for you here at UCLA?
I don't know if a lot of folks know this, but I started my first company when I was a freshman. Actually, I started an SAT business. It was actually a tutoring business. Yeah. And the first person I tutored went up 400 points, and I take full credit for that.
I wish I had known you when my kids were studying for the SAT.
But what happened was then I started tutoring the whole neighborhood and then eventually started a business with one of the fathers of the students. And so I was running an SAT business.
Right.
We had an office. Freshman? Yeah, freshman. So my first day, when we first opened, I was wearing a tie, white shirt. I was 18. The students were 17, and there were 3 of them. Yeah. And that's how things start. And it was in a nice office building. You get the idea. So actually Friday night was the night before I would do 8 hours of teaching on Saturday. And so I was usually, and people don't realize this, but teaching is a performance in many ways. It's not just about the material. It's also about how do you engage and how do you inspire, how do you tell stories, how do you make it funny. How do you also how do you also be firm so that the students don't get too out of control? Right. And so I would always be nervous Friday night, and I also knew that I started work at 8 a.m. So I didn't have big Friday nights here, but when I read the Daily Bruin, I usually could figure out something about what happened the weekend before.
Somebody did.
Yes, I always got good stories of what happened Friday night, so I'm sorry if I didn't give you anything salacious.
Well, maybe it was Saturday night better than Friday
Saturday
night?
nights were definitely better than Friday.
Anything you want to share about Saturday
No,
night?
not at all. You could have just gone with
Okay,
that.
we'll go. I thought that was an easy way to start off. So I know when I was here at Anderson, I spent, I think, like 99% of my time at Anderson. It just was a very tight-knit community.
I mean, business school's different.
It is a little different.
Business
yeah.
school's different than engineering school.
Yeah. Well, so when you were at engineering,
I know that I hire them, and I'm amazed at all of the drinking skills that they have.
there were a lot of drinking. Yeah, Thursday. We maybe should have talked about Thursday night. Thursday night would have been the night to be talking about in business school, but
Every
anyway.
night in
Yeah.
business school.
I didn't know when I was there, but
Okay, maybe
maybe not
things-
my crowd.
I don't
hung
know.
out with. Anyway, but so I did spend a lot of time with the people at business school, but I'm just curious, when you were here, was there a certain place or a professor or a person that you would sort of go to that you were inspired by, or somebody that, you know, felt you could talk to? It sounds like you had a lot of ideas early on, so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was always an idea guy, but you know, when you're first getting started, you don't always know how to make it into reality. Look, I think it's probably, for me, it was more about a place than a person, right? Like the quad, you know, actually right outside these doors, actually, when you can just look over and see that view. And it might be, if you're lucky, it's a warm spring day, or maybe, you know, maybe it's at night and you had a long day. Just taking a breath, you know, and I honestly, I didn't even think about that until I came back today. I didn't even remember.
You kind of had that memory.
Yeah, I was like, wow, I
Yeah.
remember this place, and it was so awesome.
It was a
So,
good memory.
Yeah, it was great.
That's
Yeah.
good. That's good. No professors that you.
Well, there were some, like I had this electrical engineering professor who had this German accent who was, I can't remember his name, but he was awesome. And I had a physics professor. He also had a German accent. He was awesome.
There's a trend here. I see.
No,
This is a reoccurring
I just
theme.
maybe they stood out. My algorithms professor was also amazing, but yeah, that's the best I got for you. I'm a terrible interviewee right now, but we'll just keep going.
We're just getting to the
All
good
right,
stuff.
fair
We're
enough.
just at the UCLA days. Wait till we get to
All right, fair
afterwards.
enough.
So I found it super interesting reading about your JAMPAD mentoring. I mean, I do a lot of mentoring myself, and I think it's super important, you know, when you have had success. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what that's all about, but what I understand, it's you getting together with entrepreneurs and kind of brainstorming in, I guess, a pretty relaxed environment. I think it's interesting to hear what you're doing, but also, you know, there's a lot of programs now, like at UCLA, where they're investing in entrepreneurs to, you know, mentor them, but in a little bit more of a structured way, where they're fostering these entrepreneurs and even teaching entrepreneurship. So do you see a world where, you know, your version can mash up with more of the, you know, higher education version?
Well, first, I'll give a little context on this thing called the JAMPAD. We are like basically after my last company I did for 7 or 8 years, and the first 4 years I didn't make a salary, and there were some tough times in there. But even though it was a very modest success, you know, for that company, for me it felt like a grand slam. But when you go through hard times, and it's difficult, there's two things. One, you need to unwind. But two, you don't know if you're going to be able to do it again. You doubt yourself. You don't know if you have it in you to do the whole thing again. You go, maybe it was a fluke, or maybe I just don't have it, to have the energy. And so I had this in-between time between my last company and Uber. It was probably 1.5 years. And so what I started doing was angel investing, because I was still interested in ideas, but I couldn't be fully in the game. And what just emerged was that these entrepreneurs that I'd invest in or that were pitching me or what have you, we just started to create a community of our own. And my house was open. It was an open house.
Right.
And people would come by at any time of the day or night, and they'd have problems. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean problems. When I talk about problems, I'm talking about like the way a math professor might look at math problems. Like without math problems, you're not a math professor. And without hard ones, nothing's interesting. So they would come with all kinds of problems. It could be technology. It could be architecture, like on the technology side. It could be they needed to get their first sale. It could be that they needed to go raise money. And I would engage, or it could be about a little feature, or it could be anything. And we would either engage one-on-one, or we talk about big picture ideas. Sometimes people would come literally to my house after bars at like 3 a.m., and then we would just have a jam sesh. And it wasn't, people think of jam sessions, they think of like jazz musicians. This is sort of like that. It's like ad hoc, impromptu, improvisational, but it's about ideas. And so it just became this welcoming environment for entrepreneurs from all all around to come together and just talk about things and solve problems together.
Do you still do this?
Well, actually, because I'm doing Uber now, what happens is that that's what I love doing most.
Right.
And so what happens is that's my whole day, every day.
This,
Is that my management style, the way I like to look at what I do is I'm problem solver in chief.
got it.
And so I don't get upset about problems, I get excited.
Right.
So let's go.
That's the engineer in you.
Yeah, and so then all day long, my calendar looks crazy, but I'm excited because I have all these crazy, interesting problems to solve with really smart, energetic thought partners. And so, when you bring it back, I guess the last part of your question was bringing it back for university and what a university can do to help entrepreneurs. I think there's some basics to teach, but the blogs do most of that at this point. But there's some basics to teach, but I think the most important thing about entrepreneuring is doing. And so, if you could figure out a way to have a class where it's just like, hey, you got to start something, and you got to get going. And here's some basics on that. And maybe, every week, the professor's really just sort of like a board member checking in on you. Mm-hmm. That could be interesting. The other thing, I wrote this, I don't know if it was in the Daily Bruin or one of the other publications, but I got a bunch of questions that I answered before coming here.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
And they said, what could we do to promote entrepreneurism, or how did UCLA help? And I said, well, I had the engineering curriculum. And the only thing that mattered for my grades was my midterm and my final. I didn't have to show up to class. So thank you so much, UCLA. And I'm kidding, sort of.
Give you some other time to do some things.
Yeah, no, that flexibility actually matters, so.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you talked about in between your first company and Uber, you had like a year and a half, and I think it's interesting, the comment you made about, you sort of, not that you had self-doubt, but you don't ever hear, entrepreneurs who have had multiple companies ever talk about sort of that step between the first and second, or the second and third company, like, was it luck? Can I do it again? So was this mentoring, did that help you sort of, start to think about,
Well, there's a couple things.
Steps?
First was that I during that time, I angel invested in 10 companies. And the funny thing is, it's like so entrepreneurial, I basically invested all of the money that I got. Right? So that was kind of funny. But people, I'd go to a cocktail party and people would ask, so, hey, Travis, how's it going? Or what's going on? And all I could do was say how it was going for 10 other people.
Right.
And for me, that didn't feel authentic. For me personally, that just wasn't my thing. And it started to push me towards that a little bit. And that's why when I would get involved when I did invest, it wasn't just like putting chips on a roulette table and letting it ride. I was sort of getting involved.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny when I actually realized that I should be doing it again. It's kind of a funny story. I watched a Woody Allen movie,
Which one?
It was Vicky Cristina Barcelona.
Oh, that's a fun one.
This tells you how old I am, but anyways. So I saw it in the theater, and it was a brilliant film. And this was the thing I was wrestling with at the time, and I walked out of the film, I go, who made that? Well, it was Woody Allen, and I'm like, that guy's old. And I'm like, but he still got it. Like, he still has his art. He still has the energy to create. He still has ideas that are brilliant, and he's still sharing it with the world. And so that's when I said, you know what? Let's just try. And then, I basically said, I'm going to do something, and then Uber became that.
Oh, that's great. So when I went to UCLA, when I went to business school, I picked that program because it was very collaborative, which was great. Having been in the real world and then coming back to school, that made sense to me. Well, tonight your parents, I saw them here someplace. Where are they?
They're right there.
Oh, here they are.
Hi, Mom.
Don and Bonnie. They're great. Congratulations, by the way. Anyway, I'm just curious, what kind of advice did they give you, as far as, encouraging you to go to UCLA, besides the fact that we know your dad went here, so that probably had something to do with it. And the second part of the question is, what advice did they give you that helped you pursue, I think, entrepreneurship pretty early? I mean, your freshman year in college.
Yeah, I think what you'll find with most hot-blooded entrepreneurs is that their parents told them a lot of things and they did none of them.
They didn't listen.
So if I ended up in engineering school, just like my dad, it wasn't because he told me, because he knew if he told me anything, I would do the opposite. So it wasn't really about that. I mean, of course, I respect my dad and I respect the engineering mentality. It was just so much of how I defined myself as a kid. But I think what they actually said is kind of interesting because you hear about parents that really push their kids, straight A's, perfect SAT score, like all of this. Actually, they just sort of said, do your best. Do your best at whatever you do and you're good. And they also said, you can be whatever you want. And it was like one of those things where it's like you're 6 years old and you're in a car and your mom is driving you home from school and she tells you this. She's crying. That's going to make me cry. You can't do that, Mom.
Well, I know that feeling. I get like that.
So if your mom tells you this every day when she's taking you home from school, then that's what you believe. And so even when, look, I like to win, I'm a competitive guy, but when I lose, I don't feel bad as long as I put everything I had to win. And so, and also I don't sort of assume that there's a box and I have to be in it. I just I say what's outside of the box. Like I can just be whatever I want to be. And that really came from my mom.
That's great. Yeah. So I found being an entrepreneur such an interesting journey. For me, starting One Kings Lane was a real passion play. It was something I was looking for. I was looking for great products for my house online back in 2009, and it didn't exist. So I'm like, aha, there's an opportunity here. And with my business partner, Alec Pincus, who you know, in the height of the recession, we decided to bootstrap this business and go at it. And I think from that first day to every single day after that, I have learned some incredible lesson every single day. It's just been remarkable.
And if you're not, you should just push harder.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the way of the entrepreneur. I mean, we know that, but I think folks who are about to become entrepreneurs or don't know, like, should I be one? It's one of those interesting things that you figure out pretty quickly.
Yeah. So I'm curious, because you had a couple of companies before you started Uber. Were there lessons that you learned from those experiences that allowed you to really, when you started Uber, to look at it maybe a little bit differently, or things that, helped make Uber the success that it is today?
Well, look, I think I said a little bit about some of the difficult times that I had in past companies. And I think what that does, especially during lean years, if you start during lean years,
Yeah, that's
especially lean, like when you're just, when you go back home because you live at home because you don't have money for rent, that kind of lean. What it forces you to do is it forces you to be incredibly fierce about details because there's nobody else. It's just you. Like at some point in my last company, it was me and one engineer, and then it was just me. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be fierce about details, and then also the thing that came out of it because we were so lean for so long is because I was the only one that could do, I was head of sales, CFO, CTO, all that at the same time. It required you to get good at all of the things.
right.
And so being an engineer, you had to learn how to sell, because my last company was enterprise software. I had to sell it. And I didn't know what that meant, and I had to go just try and figure it out. And so I became fierce about details and sort of my style as an entrepreneur is I'm very well-rounded. I sort of had to get good at a lot of different things. And I think that's very helpful with Uber because of the complexity of all the things we have to deal with and the importance of every detail in making sure that it goes well or goes right. It just sort of works out. It works out that was really good training.
And do you find, I think it's interesting being fierce about detail, because I agree with you when you're lean and you really work in every single angle.
You can't go and say, I'm going to leave the details to somebody else.
So do you find that you have to kind of hang on to that a little bit more after you start to raise a lot of money?
So, the way I do it is I don't believe that you can make decisions on anything without having all of the details. And so anytime I'm making a decision in the day, it's when I have all of the important details on the thing that I'm deciding on. Now, when you have a team of 5,000 people, that means there's a lot of decisions you're not looking at.
Right.
And so you have to prioritize what are the problems you want to solve. What are the decisions that are coming to my desk? But then have a culture of mass creative problem solving where in any room at Uber, the person that's making the decision must have all of the details. And if they don't, or they don't have the time to get them, they must delegate that decision to somebody else. And so I don't want to be in a place where I'm not getting the details, because then that's a place where I'm not solving any problems.
That makes a lot of sense. One of the lessons that I did learn very quickly, I think because the internet's kind of amazing this way, you get feedback very quickly, so you can change and iterate, kind of on the spot, was that if we did try to make something work better and it didn't work, to fail fast. So you hear this a lot. And I think it's actually, I've seen it happen a bunch of times in our company, and it makes a lot of sense. So was there ever a point in your journey, maybe in Uber or your other companies, where you thought, this is not what I thought it's going to be, and how did you deal with it?
Well, I think that's interesting, right? I keep coming back to my last one, which is, okay, so imagine if you went 4 years without a salary. There could be a fifth.
Yeah.
You don't know that, this is, all of a sudden I'm gonna get a salary tomorrow. Right. You don't know.
Yeah.
And this could keep going. And so the thing that happens when you go that long, that hard, is, well, two things. I never had doubt of myself during that time. I just always believed in what I did, so I kept going. But I think what you find is that your friends and people that are close to you can start to doubt.
They start to doubt, yeah.
And what happens, it's not everybody. Some people stick by you no matter what. But a lot of people...
Your mom.
My mom, no matter what, for sure. But you're, a lot of people basically start to doubt, and when they do that, they care about you, but they kind of think you're crazy. And when people think you're crazy, you don't have a lot to talk about. of course, the only time you do talk is when you're trying to ask them for a favor anyways, because you have nothing, right? So what happens is you get, it actually becomes a lonely existence in many ways that you have to sort of work your way out of. Now, what was the question again? I got lost in that one.
About, if you ever questioned what you were doing and how do you deal with it?
So yeah, so the question is when do you stop?
Yeah.
When do you move on to the next thing? And a lot of people won't admit this, but when you get acquired, it can be a moment of celebration. But it is also a moment of acquiescence. It's a moment of giving in. And the reason I sold my last company was because I'd gotten to a point where it was flat forever. Like, not just flat, it was at or below the x-axis, which was at 0, okay? And there was this little blip. It was like starting to do this, but it was like, I've seen this before, and then it goes back to 0.
Right.
And basically I said, if this is a blip, and it goes back to 0, because I was about to raise more money, right? I said, I will literally go into the funny farm. I'll literally lose my shit. And when you are literally talking about, I will lose my sanity, like for real,
Right.
that's when it's time to move on.
It's a good time to move on. For real, not just kidding.
For real,
yeah.
for real insanity.
Was there ever a moment in Uber where you had any doubts about what you were doing? I mean, the success and the growth has been so remarkable.
It's a different kind of insanity.
Okay.
But so you can get there. You can get there, but not through lean times, but through heady times. Like the point is that whether you are a struggling entrepreneur that's not seeing product market fit and you don't have a salary and whatever, or it could be the most successful thing. The entrepreneur's way is to push until it hurts. Is to push because if you don't, it will not succeed. Something else will pass it by. And that's just the way of it, and entrepreneurs in the room know that. You can go insane a lot of different ways, right? And so the Uber journey is different. We've seen so much success, and to be honest, right, that's a blessing in so many ways. What a great problem to have. It's like too insane. But you also have to find ways to be balanced and centered through that, because you want to push till it's uncomfortable, till it hurts a little bit. But you have to know that balance, because if you go over, then there's always too much, and so you have to know that balance. Everybody has their own red line, so to speak. If you think of the odometer or the speedometer, right? Like
go off the
if it goes into the red, you can go there a little bit, but if you're in that red too long, you're gonna get back into the doing damage. You're gonna go back into I'm going to lose my shit. And there's a lot of different ways to get there. And so there are times in Uber's history, or whatever you want to call it, in the 5 years we've been doing our thing, where I was on the edge in terms of just pushing too hard, maybe not sleeping enough or whatever, and you have to know how to back off.
Right.
And you have to know how to get back into that healthy zone. Now, one of the interesting things is when you push into the red, and the red is not one-dimensional, it's n dimensions. There's many different dimensions to push. But you often find that by going there to that place where you thought you couldn't go, that there's actually a reservoir there of a lot more than you thought.
You didn't know it was there. That's interesting.
And so, again, that's something for an entrepreneur, but we try to teach that at the company generally. But you always have to find that balance.
That's great. So I know my career is very different than yours. So I worked for large corporations for the majority of my career until I had this aha moment, and then became a lunatic and had to push as hard as I could to make that happen.
And by the way, that's interesting. Not a lot of people do that.
Yeah, it was a little unusual, but
That's an interesting move.
everything we do at One Kings Land's a little different. But
Fair enough.
But I think you answered this, but this question had two parts. So, why you chose to start your own business versus going to work for a corporation. But I think the more interesting part of the second part of the question is, who should start a business and who shouldn't?
So look, I think when I was in college, I didn't really know what an entrepreneur was. I naturally gravitated towards starting things, and it was really a fascination with ideas. Ideas that if they became reality, people would be blown away. It was sort of like just a fascination with trying the impossible and seeing if you could actually make something impossible possible. It's just like that. Mm-hmm. But you still in college, you don't know who you are yet. And so I still had this inkling to go after, okay, what's the big corporate job? Like, what's the interesting, sexy, like, hardest job to get? Maybe I should do that. Because I didn't know who I was yet. So I just went after what people thought was awesome. And so, like, one of the funnier parts of this is I did a summer at BCG.
Yeah.
It didn't go well.
Telling people what to do.
It didn't go well. Because I was walking around like I was a partner and I was a summer associate.
Yeah.
And everybody knows that person. I know it at my own company, the summer intern who's walking around like, and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I was that guy.
They're working
so
for you
yeah,
now.
I don't think my reviews went very well. I think they were diplomatic. But being an entrepreneur or not is actually about finding yourself. And actually, it's not even about being an entrepreneur. It's about whatever you do in life. If you're going to spend half of your waking hours or more doing something, you should believe in it with your heart. Yeah. And just the only way you can do that is to know who you are. But once you know who you are, have a vision for how you want to work, how you want to spend that part of your life, a philosophy for work, and then you just go do it. And you start every day, and you learn stuff as you go, and that's the thing.
That's kind of what we do, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what you do. Now the person who asked, should I be an entrepreneur or not, I'm like, no.
Yeah, that's it.
And so yeah, I go back, just, hey, get to know yourself, man. But I find that most entrepreneurs gravitate to it without asking that question. They just kind of can't help it.
Yeah. When Allie and I started our business in 2009, before we started, we got two really great pieces of advice, which the first one was, move quickly, because first to market wins, second usually wins, and after that, who knows?
Sure. And
we moved very quickly. We literally, from the day we formed our company, and went to market in 5 months. So we heard that, in our heads a lot. And also the second piece of advice was to keep it simple. I think in today's world with so much going on, if somebody doesn't get it in a split second, it's not good enough, and you need to go back and fix it so that they do. I know there's a ton of entrepreneurs here that would love to hear your two pieces of advice. What you think it takes in today's world to be a success.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, a lot of folks ask me questions like that. For me, I'm not a big believer in the sort of aphorisms, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, the advice is, maybe it's some of the things I've already said, like, if you know yourself, then you can start to build a vision for what you want to become and what you want to do with your life. So that's probably the most important. But if you're in the entrepreneurial mode already, and I guess what I'd really say is, instead of advice, I find, because the problem I have with advice is that I used to seek out advice all the time. And what would happen is I'd go talk to all, like, 20 people when I had a hard decision. And then I started to be able to predict what they were going to tell me. Mm. And it was always based on their own experience, of course, and you could predict it, but then even if I could predict what they were going to say, that didn't help me solve the hard decision that I had to make. And so I'm not a believer in advice because of that. What I actually love is stories, is instead of asking somebody to tell me what to do, what I prefer is tell me a story. And I can then listen and hear the parts that are interesting about what they're saying and that do apply to what decision I've got to make. And then I have to do the hard thing of actually making the hard decision. Because, by the way, the easy decisions, you don't need advice on.
Right.
It's only the hard ones, but then the hard ones are so hardcore, so hard, so difficult, nobody can actually tell you what to do because you're still stuck with, is it the right thing? Mm-hmm. And so I find the stories are the best way to get there. And people who are good storytellers and who have great stories to tell because they've lived a full life are the people you should seek out when you have a hard decision.
When you have those hard decisions, do you find, are you in touch, or do you find intuition is something that guides you at all? Being an engineer, maybe not so much, but...
No, there's an intuition with that too, right? I mean, innovation happens at the cross of an sort of analytical mindset with creative instincts, right? So, and I like to say that innovation also is sort of, there's perception, there's what everybody thinks, this is conventional wisdom. Sometimes it's right, but a lot of the time, especially when it comes to innovation, it's wrong.
Yep.
Well, why? Because the only reason innovation happens is when conventional wisdom is wrong. So perception is different than reality. And if you're good at seeing reality and seeing when perception is wrong, that right there is the innovator's playground. And the bigger the distance between the two, the bigger the playground. And so I look for those things, and I think for entrepreneurs that are just up and coming, think about that. Because the entrepreneur often is thought of as a clever or like a little bit of a troublemaker, but it's actually because all they're doing is looking for when somebody else is wrong. When they're saying that bromide or that aphorism that they've heard before, but they're like trying to figure out all the times when it's not. And so maybe you can even think of like the 8-year-old kid that's always trying to prove, is trying to find the seam, is trying to find where you're not correct. That's what's going on in the entrepreneur's mind all the time, and that's why people don't like us.
It's the debater in you.
It's a debate thing. It's like, I'm going to prove you wrong because you're not totally right thing. It's that thing.
Let's talk a little bit about values at Uber.
No.
I'm sure that you have a list of values, well, maybe not, but I'm sure you do at the company. What's important at Uber? What values are important?
We actually just came out with our values.
Oh, really? Just recently?
Just recently.
Oh. What did you do up until then?
Well, it's not funny.
He's busy. He's been very busy.
No, it's not that. It's what happens is it's like any culture or society. In many ways, at the beginning, it's obvious how you work. But when you start to get to thousands of people, then there's a lot of people coming in that aren't close enough to the beginning.
Right.
And so it actually took me, I've been working on it since January and just rolled it out 2 weeks ago. 14 values, and basically it's our philosophy of work. Now the first cultural value that we have is what we call celebrate the city. And so that's our purpose, that's our mission, which is everything Uber does is to make a city better. Nothing we do makes a city worse. And our purpose is to bring efficiency to transportation, to bring efficiency in technology to make that a reality. And celebrate the city teams that help make it happen. Celebrate the city leaders and civic leaders that are part of that success. Maybe even, it's coming. It's celebrating the riders and the drivers that make this all happen.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And I don't think I'm guessing it probably didn't change, but you just now have actually codified it. You've written it down.
Yeah, well, it really for us, it was a philosophy of work. And so it took a lot of energy, and it took hundreds of hours for us to really hone it to its essence.
It's hard to do.
No.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so this question came from Anderson, and it's a very long question, so I'm going to actually read it to you. There's lots of parts to it. We received a lot of detailed questions from Anderson students. Everyone is interested in how you've scaled the business so quickly. It's clear there's a lot of growth potential through expansion in other markets, which you kind of alluded to. Can you talk a little bit more about what considerations are taken when you go into new cities? How do you estimate the demand before entering into a new city?
Yep.
And then how do you go about ensuring that the supply, is sufficient before launching to meet the demand?
Well, look, I think this gets into a little bit of our secret sauce, but
Okay.
it's like, how do you do everything? Let me start with, so I think, look, when you get to 350 cities, you start to see patterns. In fact, when you get to 350 cities and you have, well over 1,000 engineers, machines start to see patterns. Mm-hmm. But the point is that you don't always know where it's going to land in a city. When we launched in LA here, it was 3.5 years ago. We didn't know it was going to work, but just get started.
But I'm curious, LA, why would you think it wouldn't work in LA?
Because everybody drives, right? So you go to a place like New York, everybody takes cabs. You're
Right.
like, we can beat a cab, for sure.
Right.
But when everybody drives, it's not as obvious that you're like, are people, how do you get them to not drive?
Yeah, pent-up demand not to drive.
Hey,
have
look,
somebody else.
I was there, right?
Yeah.
I was there, but it wasn't clear that it would work. And things are so spread out, all of this, there are a lot of question marks, and we just hadn't answered yet. It worked out really well because people don't, when they go out, they don't like to drink and drive.
No?
They don't like to sit on the 405.
Right.
That
So-
rhymed, that was good. But
poetry
it's
coming out of
easy
it.
after the fact to say that, but you don't know going in.
Yeah.
And that's it. And so we try to find new things that we can do where we don't know, and that's what continues to keep it exciting.
So I think for a lot of us, Uber, I know for me, has totally changed my life wherever I go. I mean, San Francisco, I was an early adopter, and you could never get a cab. So the minute I had to go to the airport, I'd be having an anxiety attack until I had the Uber app, which is amazing. You keep iterating and adding new features and new ways for people to get around. Uber Pool is one of the newer ones. Carpooling options for riders, which is awesome. What was the inspiration for this product, and do you consider yourself an environmentalist? That was the second part of this question.
That's interesting. I mean, environmentalism is basically about protecting the way things are, or protecting the environment as it works. But I think in many ways, nature is at the same time disrupting itself and protecting itself. And I like to say that Uber Pool sort of does both, right? Is that in many ways it's redefining how transportation works in cities, making it far more efficient. Almost half of the requests we get in San Francisco are Uber Pool requests.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, literally.
It's amazing.
Literally hundreds of thousands of people carpooling, right? So we're changing the way transportation works as a disruption element, but at the same time, we're reducing congestion, reducing pollution, and all these other great things that it's really interesting when you can find something that's disrupting and in some ways protecting at the same time.
Okay, so last question, unless you
Okay.
want to add anything else in. There are a lot of people in the audience tonight who are obviously fascinated with Uber and what you're doing. We're almost at the end of 2015. I don't know where time's going. Maybe you could give us an idea of what's in store for 2016
I don't
from
know.
Uber.
Okay,
Not
thank
just
you.
in
That makes it
general.
easier.
We're
I'm
not
like,
going to talk about
oh my God,
we're not
Donald
gonna-
Trump's gonna win.
Yeah, exactly. We're not going to. We're not going to talk about the elections. That's for another conversation.
I'm gonna move to China if Donald Trump wins, or
You
somewhere.
probably have
I
a
don't
few
know
people
where.
going with you.
Canada? I
Yeah,
don't know.
somewhere. It could be an opportunity.
So 2016, I think in a lot of ways, Uber has made a lot of bets in terms of types of interesting products that we're launching and looking at, things like this. I think, we're going to see them through. So like Uber Eats, which is food delivery. We have Uber Rush, which is package delivery. It's starting to get into city logistics. Those things are going to be really interesting focus for 2016. I think we're going to have a big push in Africa in 2016. I think China, we're going to figure out, how the long-term competition is going to go. We have a very fierce competitor out there. I think in our developed markets, we're going to see, we're going to go from, okay, we have dozens of cities that are profitable. We're going to start to see regions that are profitable. And really, maybe even developed markets as a whole will just be profitable. And that's great because then you can invest in these new things. You can invest in expanding in new places. And so those are the types of things that we look forward to.
Great,
So,
good.
yeah, cool.
Well, I hope you all join me in thanking Travis for, I think, an amazing dialogue.
Thank you.
It's always great to talk to a fellow entrepreneur, and also just want to thank the UCLA VC Fund, who had a very big part in making all of this happen. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Don't forget
Well,
your
thank you
award.
all for coming tonight. It's been a pleasure. And one more round for Susan Feldman and Travis Kalanick. Have a great night.